Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Top Level Podcast. I'm your host, Connor, back here again today for NFL Week 2. And today I'm joined by one of my good friends who's also part of our pick group on the Top Level Sports website, picking all the NFL games this year, is Steven.
What's up, guys?
All right, so today, again, as I already said, we're going to be doing Week 2 NFL picks. That's going to come towards the end. First of all, we're going to start off. I'm a Giants fan. Steven is a Texans fan. Giants and the Texans have been in the news a lot this week, mostly for bad reasons. So we're going to go over a little bit of how we think our teams have been, neither of our teams have really been doing that well last week. Texans changing their quarterbacks and the Giants with the whole JPP mess and the clock mess at the end of the Cowboys game. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to go into some of the teams that surprised us in Week 1 and some of the teams that we thought played pretty poorly in Week 1. And then we'll get into our Week 2 picks. So first off, Steven, the Texans, after Week 1, changed their quarterback. They started the season off with Brian Hoyer. Now they're going with Ryan Mallett. You think it's too early to make a change, or what do you think about it?
Well, I liked Mallett from the beginning. Personally, I always thought he should have been the starter. You know, both Hoyer and Mallett were with Brady and Belichick in New England. They all had that connection. They decided to go with Hoyer. You know, I thought let's wait and see what happens. And then Week 1 came around, and it didn't go so well.
Nope.
You know, they left him in there for a little while. He started going, and nothing happened. You know,
he wasn't really able to provide too much of a spark for that offense.
No, and they decided to make the change even in that game to go to Mallett, and it was a huge turnaround for the offense. It was a completely different game with him in there, and so we still have a terrible secondary, and so we're going to get scored on a lot, but at least we'll be able to stay in the game offensively now, I think.
Yeah. I think it was kind of weird because, you usually don't see, definitely in the first week of a season, teams change their quarterbacks in the middle of the game week. But that is what happened with the Texans, already in the third quarter, they pull Hoyer, they bring in Mallett. Mallett does good. He gets them kind of back into the game. We knew they never really were going to come back, but he does get them a touchdown, and he does, help get them at least a little bit closer in the final scoreline. They only lose by 7, but it really wasn't that close. So do you think, what I think about it is that if the Texans had any doubt that if Hoyer was going to struggle, that they should just put in Mallett, that they should have just started Mallett from the beginning, because I don't think it works for chemistry just to have 1 week and then to already be switching up the quarterbacks. I think it's, I think it definitely hurts the team.
Well, I think they thought Hoyer was going to be the guy for them. I think they had full confidence in him. I don't think they were expecting to need a change, but it just really didn't turn out that way. He really had some trouble. The more the pressure came, he just wasn't able to handle it, and he was making mistakes.
Yeah. So I guess it's probably going to be a good move for them in the end, just that they will probably get, hopefully, a better quarterback, someone that they can put their faith in for the rest of the season, someone that can perform better, but maybe they should have just gone with him all along. With the Giants, JPP, we have finally seen pictures of his hand, and JPP has really annoyed me over the last week because the whole JPP thing, it doesn't make sense to me because, he says, 4th of July accident, we know his hand gets hurt, and then a month later we hear, it's actually been amputated, this finger, and so everyone goes crazy. And then a couple days ago, it's surprise! My middle finger's busted up, and they've cut off part of my thumb, and it just you kind of get the feeling like JPP knew at some point in time he's gonna come back to the Giants, and he's gonna have to show them his hand. What was the point in lying about it for 2 months just to come back and say, oh yeah, my hand, it's not even as good as the 9 fingers you think it is.
Yeah, it was not pretty at all. But he had a pretty good quote on that.
It was the quote for JPP today. He said, "I don't remember the last time." This is paraphrasing. "I don't remember the last time I sacked someone just using my index finger." And while that might be true, you can't sack someone with one finger. If this is going to help, it is going to hurt with his blocking, or at least trying to get to the quarterback, and it's going to hurt with his grip strength. So I think it's definitely going to affect his play. So, if I'm the Giants right now, I'm considering cutting Jason Pierre-Paul because, he's kind of made a fool of the organization. He's hasn't really been taking this, I don't think, as seriously as he should have. I know he says he's very serious about his rehab and all of that, but I feel like he should have just been honest with the team up front. Maybe could have gotten some better medical training, and we wouldn't be in the problem that we're in. And then going on to what happened in our game against the Cowboys last week, we had horrible clock management at the end of the game. I was going crazy in some group chats I was in, saying on 3rd and down that if we pass the ball, it is a horrible idea, that we need to run the ball, we need to take clock off, and we end up passing the ball and giving the Cowboys just enough time to march down the field, just like it was so predictable that they would have done. You saw once the Giants kicked the field goal, like they cut to Tony Romo smiling on the sidelines, and I just knew it was over. And it also comes out after the game. Rashad Jennings says that Eli, told him that, not to score on 1st or 2nd down. And I feel like that's kind of just a really dumb move on Eli's part. Because first of all, if you score, I don't care if the Cowboys get the ball with, a minute and a half left or 2 minutes, or if they have a timeout. It is so much harder to come back, down multiple scores with less than 2 minutes left than just to get a touchdown with like 40 seconds on the clock, because you got to score and then you got to get the onside kick. And then you got to go down and score again. I think it's a lot more difficult to do that. And they could have just iced the game by scoring a touchdown right there, I feel. And I feel Eli Manning, really, bad clock management. He's someone that's been in the league for a long time, so you kind of expect more from him in that regard. But, I just feel like it's the Giants have, they got to fix their problems, and they got to just look forward, look ahead. They got a good game against the Falcons at home. It's their first home game. I think they can win that game. I think they just got to put it behind them, leave it in the past, and they got to move forward. And I think they can still have a pretty good season if they want to. And I know they want to, because everyone's on the hot seat this year. It's crazy. If we don't make the playoffs, everybody could go. So now that we've talked about the Texans and the Giants, we're going to go into, some of the teams that surprised us. I think there were 3 teams really that we didn't think would be, well, at least near as good as they were actually in week 1. And I think the first one of those teams is the Titans. And it was a huge game. It was rookie Jameis Winston against Marcus Mariota, and Mariota killed him. I mean, we're like 6 minutes into the game, and it's already 21-0, 2 touchdowns for Mariota, pick 6 for Jameis. Do you think the Titans can keep up their level of play that they had last week in this next game that they have? They're going to be playing the Browns, so they have the opportunity, but will they continue?
Well, I think Mariota is going to be good this season. I like the Titans much more than I did last season. Definitely. But they were playing Tampa Bay. Yeah. Now, Tampa Bay got Jameis Winston, but they're still pretty horrible. Yeah. And it's going to be tough for them to keep that level of production throughout the season. Now, they're going to be better than most people think they are. Most people thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season, but I don't think they'll be that good.
Yeah, I think, at tops, we're looking at maybe an 8-8 team. Yeah. I think, Marcus Mariota can do a lot of things. I think he's definitely better than Mettenberger. So I think they definitely have gotten a good addition in the quarterback spot, as they should have with the number 2 pick.
Absolutely.
I think their team is starting to come around a little bit, but again, they're a couple years away from being a contender. I expect them to beat the Browns, because the Browns are, along with the Bucs, I think the 2 worst teams in the league. But after that, I expect them to struggle. Maybe more realistically, 6 or 7 wins, I would say. And then the next team, speaking of the Browns, the team that killed the Browns, it was the Jets. The Jets weren't supposed to be good this season, but they come out and they destroy Johnny Manziel, and they win the game, I think, 31-10. And they really shocked some people. Forced 3 turnovers, and Ryan Fitzpatrick looks a lot better than we thought he would have been. You think the Jets can? Well, first of all, they got a huge game Monday night against the Colts in Indianapolis. I don't think they have a chance in that game. But what do you think for their season?
Well, I think the Jets have a chance. First of all, I think when Geno Smith comes back, they need to stick with Ryan Fitzpatrick, because I personally don't like Geno Smith at all.
I think he should wear a chin guard.
Oh, I definitely agree there. Fitzpatrick, he's consistent. You know what you're gonna get, and I feel like that's a pretty good thing to know in this league, especially this passing league, to know that you have a quarterback you can trust. And they got Ivory at running back. He's gonna be solid this season. As far as the Colts, I don't think they have a chance against them, but going forward, they're at least someone to respect.
Yeah. I think Todd Bowles, he's done a great job with the defense. I mean, the Jets have really gotten lucky on defense. They go from Rex Ryan to Todd Bowles. The problem is they never have any offense.
No.
If they can pull together some offense, they could be a good team. But no, they've gone from, Mark Sanchez to Geno, So now they're working with Fitzpatrick. And I think it's a good point that, it's better to have a quarterback that's going to be average all the time than, like, let's say RG3.
Yeah.
Someone, he could be great, but he could also be horrible, and he could also get injured, like, every play of the game.
Definitely.
Always a chance for him to get hurt. So I agree. I think the Jets are probably, for the season, in a similar position to the Titans. They're just not there yet, but they could, end up getting 6, 7, 8 wins.
Yeah.
But the last team that really surprised us is a team that, came out of nowhere. Well, a decent amount of people actually picked them to beat the Colts, but they were up like 24-0 early on in that game, and they just dominated the Colts, and they stopped Andrew Luck for most of the game, which is crazy because Andrew Luck is one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the league, probably. If he's not already, by the end of the season, he will be. And that's the Buffalo Bills. And their defense, coming into the season, we thought the Bills' defense could be one of the best in the league. I think it definitely has a chance to be the best in the league. I love the Bills this season. I really do. They're at home against the Patriots. I expect them to beat the Patriots. And I know this is a little hypocritical because last week I said, I thought the Bills with no offense could probably be no better than 8-8. But Tyrod Taylor in his first start, he played incredible. Definitely way more than they thought he was going to be. So in this, I think really what's going to end up is that we're going to have a really interesting 3-way race between the Patriots, the Bills, and the Dolphins, all going for that division championship in the AFC East. And I think, I still like the Dolphins to prevail, but I think the Bills can definitely challenge for a wild card, and I think that's better than a lot of people thought they would do.
Absolutely. I like the Bills against the Patriots too for 2 reasons. First of all, a lot of people think an inexperienced quarterback against Belichick is horrible for him. But, the thing that people always talk about Belichick's preparation is that he watches hours and hours and hours of game tape on these guys. Yeah. But there's not that much tape on Tyrod Taylor. He doesn't have that much of a basis to form a plan off of. So that could really go in the Bills' favor. Also, the Patriots got gashed last week in the running game.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that Rex Ryan loves, it's running the ball. Definitely. So I think they could definitely get beat up real bad this week.
I think it's a big bounce-back week for LaShawn McCoy. We'll get into our actual picks later on, although I think it's pretty clear that we're both going with the Bills on this one. But, definitely I think the Bills have the potential. They could probably win the division if they get, if they win their games against the Patriots also. I mean, it's not out of the question for them, definitely, especially after their performance in week 1. So those were some of the teams that we thought did really well last week, but also some of the teams definitely disappointed us. And 3 of those in particular we're going to talk about. The first one was the Seahawks. They play against the Rams on the road, and we know they're not near as good on the road as they are at home, but we really weren't expecting them to lose to the Rams. I know in our pick group, all 7 of us went with the Seahawks. That was one of our few unanimous games. The only one of those games that we all got wrong. But they ended up losing the game. Nick Foles led a good fourth quarter drive. The Seahawks, what do you think the Seahawks were doing on that onside to start overtime?
I can't explain that. I have no idea what they were thinking there. It was a terrible decision in my opinion because it's basically just letting the Rams have a field goal if they can gain any first down.
Yeah, you're handing the ball over at like midfield. Yeah, it's just I don't know what they were doing. Do you think the loss of Cam Chancellor has affected that game at all?
Absolutely. This isn't the Seahawks defense that we're used to seeing. They've lost some guys. They're not as strong as they used to be, and so that's something people need to realize is that it's not as impenetrable of a defense as it used to be.
Yeah, and also, they had a chance. The Rams kick a field goal in overtime, make it 34-31. Seattle gets a chance to match them and kick a field goal or win the game. They have a 4th down on like the Rams 45 or so, and they run the ball. It's kind of an opposite of the Super Bowl when everyone was saying pass the ball. And I was actually listening to a Rams commentators on the game, and I thought it was hilarious. After the game, they're like, "Oh, what are you doing, Pete Carroll? You're supposed to pass the ball." They can never get it right. So, the Seahawks, I think they drop another one against the Packers this week. So I think they're definitely going to struggle a little more than people thought they would. Maybe they're not coasting to the AFC or the NFC championship like most people think. I still think they're definitely a playoff team. They probably get 10, 11 wins, but not as dominant.
Absolutely. It's definitely not time to panic yet.
Yeah. Another game, one of the teams that a lot of people were really high on this season is the Minnesota Vikings. Before the season, a lot of people were talking Teddy Bridgewater is going to have an incredible season. He's going to really break out. He was solid his rookie year, but really have more of a breakout season and become one of the league's better quarterbacks. They get Adrian Peterson back, and Adrian Peterson thinks he can run for 3,000 yards. He ran for 30 this week. And they ended up losing 20-3 to the 49ers, who we all thought were going to be terrible. But, basically, their defense almost shut out the Vikings. So, do you think the Vikings can bounce back? They're home against the Lions this week, or do you think it's just going to be another bad year for Minnesota fans?
I think Minnesota will be better last year, obviously better than last year, getting Peterson back. But the expectations coming into the season were just too high for them.
Yeah.
People thinking Bridgewater was going to be amazing this year. He'll be good, but I feel like just all around, maybe the expectations are too high. On their very first drive, they talked about how Bridgewater was Mr. Consistency, and he loves completions. What does he come out and do? Throw 3 incompletions.
I remember that.
Yep.
I was thinking, first drive of the regular season, you're not going to give the ball to Adrian Peterson. I remember, what was it? I think 2 years ago, his first carry of the regular season, he takes for like an 80-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
Like, why can't that happen again? Why don't you at least try it? But I think we thought their defenses, they have a pretty strong defense, and they were able to do relatively well against the 49ers, except Carlos Hyde really broke them down later on in that game. They were able to keep it close for a while. But, overall, the Vikings definitely, I don't think, before this season, a lot of people were saying, maybe they get a wild card out of the NFC. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I didn't really think it was going to happen in the first place, but I definitely don't think it's going to happen anymore. I think, again, 8-8 maybe. You think that's fair?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And then the last team, another team that people were super high on at the beginning of the season, and the one that I actually picked as an upset to win a division for the AFC East, I did not pick the Patriots like almost everybody else. I went with the Dolphins. And, they were kind of going into the season, they were actually really similar in their expectations, I think, to the Vikings. They had a quarterback that everyone thought was going to have a breakout season, and a developing offense and a solid defense, although the Dolphins definitely have a better defense than the Vikings do. But they go and they play the Redskins, and they're down 10-0, with like a minute left in the first half. They end up escaping 17-10, only from a punt return touchdown by Jarvis Landry, and I love Jarvis Landry, have him on my fantasy team, and the Miami defense. So with that punt return touchdown, I got points for Jarvis Landry and the defense.
Very impressive.
Which was incredible. What a judgment call. Just kidding. He's my number 3 wide receiver in my only defense, so I was playing him anyway. But yeah, it was kind of scary for them, almost losing to the Redskins, and everyone says, the Redskins, their organization's horrible, their quarterbacks are horrible. Do you think the Dolphins are going to be disappointing some people for the rest of the year?
I don't. I think this first game isn't a representation of what the rest of the season is going to look like. I think they'll bounce back, especially this week against Jacksonville. I think they're really going to come out and be solid for the rest of the season. Week 1, they were a lot like the Broncos. It really wasn't impressive on offense, but they seemed to just slip by with a win. Yeah. But I think they're going to come back week 2 and be solid for the rest of the year.
Well, I'm going to defend my preseason pick here, and I'm going to agree with you, and I think the Dolphins are going to bounce back. I think Jacksonville put up 9 points at home against the Panthers. Can we acknowledge that just for a second? The Dolphins have to bounce back, and if they don't bounce back, then I'm kind of scared. I don't think there's any way they'll lose that game, But I think if you can do what you need to do to get the win, that's all that really matters. And if they can, while they're still developing and because every team, they start off a little slow at the beginning of the season, and then they kind of get better as the year goes on. They get more practice time in, more film. They correct their mistakes against other teams. So I think, as long as they can get a couple wins early on in the season against some easier opponents while they're still developing, I think they can definitely still be a playoff team.
Definitely.
All right, so now we're going to move on into our last segment, and we're going to pick every game of this week. The Thursday night game, which is going to be played in a couple hours, is the Chiefs at home against the Broncos. And, this could be a bounce-back week for Peyton Manning. He struggled, no touchdowns in the first game. And I believe he had an interception in that one too, pick 6. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Peyton Manning might be getting just a little bit too old, and I think the Chiefs win this game.
I agree. The Chiefs came out last week and really destroyed the Texans. It was
Yep.
unfortunate. But, the Texans' defense, it's not that good, but the Chiefs were still very good on their own. And, the Broncos, they have some trouble with the tight ends, and Kelsey is a great one. I think he's going to be a real problem for them tonight.
Yep. I agree with you. And for our next game, it'll be the Texans going into Carolina to play the Panthers. I know a lot of jokes were being made about the Panthers, last season as a 7-8-1 team that made the playoffs, which, jokes are probably worthy there. But they come out in week one. Cam Newton's not supposed to be as good as he was. The hype's kind of settled down for Cam Newton. But they do have a pretty incredible defensive performance, and they win the game 20-9. And I think they're at home, and I think the Texans, a lot of concerns about the quarterback and just the whole offense in general until they get Foster back. So I'm going to go with the Panthers.
As much as I hate to, I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I think it'll take some time for Mallett to really solidify himself in that starting job. I mean, he was great, but there just needs to be that chemistry once you build up to be the starter. And the defense, our front seven is real strong, but that secondary has problems, and that's going to hurt us all year.
Yeah. The next game, I think it's actually pretty important for both teams. The Steelers are hosting the 49ers. The Steelers are coming off an opening day loss against the Patriots in New England. And then the 49ers, a surprising and, they played very well in their win against the Vikings. But I think the big difference maker in this game is Le'Veon Bell comes back for the Steelers. I think he can. The 49ers have a good defense, but I think Le'Veon Bell is so good he can just run all over him, and I think the Steelers are going to win.
I'll agree with you there, and I think also Antonio Brown's going to come out, and the passing game is just going to be amazing again. The Steelers' offense, it's really explosive,
Definitely.
and when it gets going, it's awfully hard to stop. And there are a few teams in the league that have an answer.
So we're both going to go with the Steelers on this one. Buccaneers at the Saints. I don't think there's a discussion to be had.
Not at all.
Going with the Buccaneers.
Of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Jameis Winston.
Did you see him?
Stop him.
Did you see that pick six? It was a perfectly thrown ball to the other team.
His first attempt, pick six. I mean,
what more could you want from a quarterback?
Nothing.
From the Saints' perspective, the Saints are going to kill him. And we're going to go next to the Lions at the Vikings. Vikings have a chance to bounce back, but again, another time I am going to be defending my preseason pick. I picked the Lions for the division, and the Lions they blew a game that they probably should have won against the Chargers, but I think they can bounce back, and I think they'll beat the Vikings.
I agree. I think Stafford, he has a little injury, but that's nothing to worry about. He'll be fine. Calvin Johnson was pretty unimpressive. People think that just because he's healthy, he's going to come back and be the old Calvin Johnson. But I think he'll come back a little bit too and be better than he was.
I hope so. I have him in fantasy.
Yeah, and my boy Amir Abdullah is going to come out and be amazing as a return man even. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely picked the Lions in this one too.
Okay, and we're moving on. Cardinals at the Bears. Bears played a little better than people thought they would against the Packers. But I think the Cardinals definitely had a strong performance against the Saints, and I think they win.
I'm going to go with the Bears on this one, actually. Okay. The Bears looked really good against Green Bay, and Cardinals, without Andre Ellington, I mean, their running back situation wasn't exactly ideal before that injury. But,
CJ2K.
In Chicago, I like the Bears this season. I think people don't give them enough credit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are hating on Jay Cutler, saying, he's just in it for the money and he's never going to be a great quarterback. But I think people don't realize that he's still a pretty decent quarterback.
Definitely.
It's not like he's trash. So I think, people have been a little too hard on him, but I'm still going to go with the Cardinals. Patriots-Bills, we kind of covered earlier. We're both going with the Bills.
Yep.
All right, so moving on. Chargers at the Bengals. This is an interesting game. I think this is one of the best games of the week, and I think it's a couple teams that they're kind of fringe playoff contenders. They could both get wild cards, but I don't think either one's going to win a division. It's going to be tough. They're both 1-0. Both, Chargers had a nice come from behind win. The Bengals, they played the Raiders. So, Bengals are at home, but I don't really care. I'm going to pick the Chargers in this game.
I'm going to go with the Bengals. I love Jeremy Hill. I think he's going to be amazing this season. And a very insignificant stat, but the Bengals playing with Andy Dalton at noon games on Sunday in the regular season are almost unstoppable.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I will tell you that I am a fan of Danny Woodhead.
Well, but this is a regular season, so Andy Dalton would be amazing. If this was a playoff game, I'd pick the Chargers.
That's true, in a heartbeat. But I think the Chargers have a decent offense.
Yep.
Keenan Allen in week 1 had
15,
16 catches, incredible. So I'm going to go with the Chargers. The Titans are playing the Browns. Maybe I think it'll be a little harder for Mariota to have another perfect passer rating. I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off.
No, it'll be tough.
But I do think that he's a lot better than Johnny Manziel is.
Absolutely.
And I think, the quarterback, we're not sure if McCown's going to be ready to play or not, but I think whoever the quarterback of the Browns is going to be, I don't think they're going to be that good. So I'm going to go with the Titans.
I agree. The Browns with Joe Hayden, it's going to be a little tougher for Mariota, but I think he'll be fine. Bishop Sankey was looking better too.
Yep.
Finally,
that's a surprise.
Right? Yeah. I like the Titans in this one too.
All right, and now my team. The Giants get their first home game against the Falcons. And, we don't have Victor Cruz back yet. We don't have Jason Pierre-Paul. We might never will. And the Falcons did play a good first game against the Eagles. They were able to eke it out barely at home against the Eagles in their first game. But I think the Giants, they go home, and I think they have a big bounce-back game because I think they know they need to. And they beat the Falcons at home last season. I don't think that really has any effect on this game. But, I don't know, maybe a little bit of an intimidation factor. And I like the Giants. I think, all things considered, they played pretty well against the Cowboys, better than a lot of people thought they would. I think the spread was 7 points, and they only lost by 1. So, not too bad. And I think the Giants can win.
Definitely. But I'm actually going to go with the Falcons on this one. I really like that passing attack. I've loved Matt Ryan. I don't think people give him enough credit for how amazing he really is at quarterback. And he and Julio Jones, they have a connection, and they can really tear up a defense when they get going. I really like the Falcons.
I think the next 3 games we can run through in about 3 seconds each.
Absolutely.
Rams at Redskins, Rams.
Of course.
Dolphins at Jaguars, Dolphins.
Definitely.
Ravens at Raiders, Ravens.
Of course.
We're taking 3 road teams, but then again, they're playing the 3 of the bottom 5 teams in the league. So, and they're all pretty solid teams themselves. So I think the Redskins, the Jaguars, and the Raiders are going to get basically dominated this week.
Yeah, not a tough decision there.
Really interesting game, especially for the NFC East. The Eagles hosting the Cowboys. Now, it would definitely help out the Giants if the Eagles won this game. So if the Giants win, they can be tied at the top of that division. Everyone at 1-1, minus the Redskins, presumably. But that's not going to be the reason why I pick the Eagles. But I'm still going to pick the Eagles. I think at home, Chip Kelly maybe a little angry, maybe. Instead of saying they have to run a play every 17 seconds, he's going to cut it down to 15 seconds. I think he's going to try to make the Cowboys' defense as tired as possible. But I think the Eagles have a strong offense, and I think the Cowboys, they didn't play too well. I know they beat us, but, they didn't play too well in week 1. So I'm going to go with the Eagles.
Yeah, I like the Eagles too. Cowboys without Des Bryant, obviously that's a setback for them. And the Eagles, I think second half, Sam Bradford's going to show up for the whole game this week, and he's going to be a lot better just as a complete game. DeMarco Murray, I think he'll have a little bit better rushing day than he did. Shouldn't be too hard for him.
Yeah.
I think the Eagles will win this one, but it could be close.
Seahawks-Packers, kind of interesting. The Seahawks, they're trying to avoid going 0-2 and it's actually a rematch of the NFC Championship game last season. So that's also pretty interesting. In this game, I think, the Seahawks are a team that wins at home. And they win almost every game they play at home. And they win about half of the ones they do on the road, statistically, at least in the Russell Wilson era. And, I think Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the league. And I don't think there's too much doubt to that. He was the MVP last season. He's a leading MVP candidate this year. And I think he can beat the Legion of Boom that's slowly evaporating.
Yeah, I like the Packers too. In Green Bay, it's awfully tough to beat them there. It's a slightly smaller version of playing in Seattle. But it's that kind of advantage that really helps them out. And Aaron Rodgers he's a great quarterback. It'll be a close one, definitely. But I think the Packers will edge them out.
All right, and in our final game, the Monday Nighter, the Jets and the Colts kind of had opposite kind of performances in week 1. The Jets played great on the offensive side of the ball and were able to hold the Browns to 10 points, so that's really not that hard to do. And then while, on the other hand, the Colts played a tough team in the Bills, and, they got pretty much destroyed for at least most of that game, and they put up some points in the fourth quarter, but they definitely didn't play well, but I think they have a great bounce-back opportunity at home against the Jets team, and I think the Colts can win.
Yep, I like the Colts coming back this week too. The Jets have a great defense like the Bills did, but the offense just isn't really there. So the Colts were able to score against the Bills last week. They'll be able to score against the Jets this week, but the Jets are going to have a tough time scoring on offense all year.
Definitely. So that wraps up our Week 2 picks, and I'd like to thank all of you for listening to Week 2 of the Top Level Sports Podcast for this NFL season. And for me and Steven, I guess we're signing off.
All right.
All right, see you guys next week.